what is service today?
So service is a relief effort for hospitality workers, and we aim to, through education, training, providing resources, help people out of financial insecurity in this industry. It looks like a lot of different things. We provide a lot of wraparound services, housing, transportation, childcare, working on how to get people healthcare benefits. There's a lot of layers to what service looks like today.
So it's, in my mind, it's almost like ending the cycle, right? I feel like a lot of people are drawn to the hospitality industry because we take everybody in, you know, like we will take everybody in, but how do you elevate those people once they're with you so that they can have other options if they choose to have other options, right? They have the resources, so they're not every dollar they're making is going to rent, so they can't get out of their situation,
Right.
you know? So you said training, housing, childcare. What is the specific financial training? Like, what does that look like?
So the training, I mean, multi-layered, right? Training looks like actually training somebody on using the latest equipment, working on different recipes. What do different sauces look like? What, you know,
So
it's culinary training. It is also training with what's out there for you and how do I fight for it?
What do you mean by
You
that?
know, how do I go get a job and speak up for the fact that this is an unfair wage, or that I'm not willing to work the 80 hours a week?
Training people how to fight for themselves.
Right.
And
So empowering
educating
people
them.
to
Yeah.
speak up.
Right.
Right. But how do you speak up if you don't know what is rightfully
So
yours?
service is to employee as Restaurant Unstoppable is to owner.
Yes. So we are working from the bottom up, because as much as, you know, the rest of the world, the rest of industry works from the top down, that rarely trickles down all the way to the people, the actual foot soldiers, right?
Yeah.
So we're working
This is huge.
with them, and hopefully that trickles upwards.
This is huge, and this is why I think it's huge. Because if we're going to transform the industry, there's going to be that a-hole restaurant owner out there who's going to cut the corners to exploit people. No matter what the people on the other side of the spectrum are doing to transform the industry, there's always going to be that person who's trying to get an edge, who's trying to cut the corners, who's trying to get to win. They're consumed with winning at the expense
Any
of everybody
cost.
else. You know, the psychopaths of the world.
Yeah.
Right. And we need to empower the next generation of employees to know when they're being dealt
Taken
with a
advantage
psychopath.
of,
Yeah,
right.
so we need to educate people. We need
Right.
to lift them up. That's the only way we're going to raise the bar and transform the industry.
And for, you know, this is an antiquated industry, and it is, you know, to your point, the only industry where we'll take on anybody. You have to have zero skill to go work in a restaurant, right? There's always a position: dishwasher, busser, barback. Like, there is always a position you can fill in a restaurant with zero education. I don't care what your background is, you know, but when you're dealing with that demographic, it is also very easy to take advantage of them, because it's a desperate community and they're not getting paid enough and they're working long hours, and it's usually a second or third job, or, you know, a huge immigrant population in the restaurant and in the hospitality industry, hotels, convention centers. That's all part of the hospitality industry, right? Huge immigrant population. So language barriers, not really knowing what your rights are. So there's a lot of room for being taken advantage of.
Right.
There is, you know, of course you'll work for $10 an hour, because what's your other option?
Right.
You don't speak the language.
There's a lot of owners that are willing to look the other way when it comes to paperwork too.
Right.
So it's like the only refugee for some people.
Right. You know, so and there's, you know, there's not a voice for those people, right? There's nobody that's fighting for them. They're just kind of left to their own resources, but they're the ones that build us up. They're the ones that brought us to this place, right? So somebody has to speak up. Somebody has to lead that.
You're doing it right
know?
now.
Not loud enough.
I love it though, and it's a great message.
And it is, you know, I think a lot of this was brought to surface during COVID, right? We realized how much restaurants were needed. grocery stores couldn't fill everybody's needs. Restaurants were asked to open up immediately to start serving people food again, right? The social aspect of things, we realized that we're not creatures that can be locked up.
Yeah.
We needed that social aspect. And it was huge, and it suddenly became this conversation. Everybody in the media was talking about, like, restaurant workers, and they're essential workers. But we didn't afford them any of the benefits of being essential workers. Like, we just threw that term around, right? Then nobody came to pick up the pieces and go, let's rebuild you.
Right.
Let's change the system.
Yeah.
Like, as soon as...
But here's the thing I've learned, if anything, is change doesn't come from the outside in. It comes from the inside out.
Right.
Just like if you're going to transform a community, it's going to start from a person transforming the people that are closest to them, and it just ripples out from there. If we're going to change the industry, it comes from people like you saying, who ripple out and influence others, lifting other owners up, being an example of what we can do. And that's the only way. It's from the inside out. And I think that, and frankly speaking, and I know how hard it was. Don't get me wrong. I know how hard it was for restaurant owners during the pandemic.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of finger pointing, a lot of people saying this isn't fair. Like, we need to change. We put ourselves in that position.
Right.
We are the only ones to blame.
Right.
We lowered the bar on ourselves because we were at competition with each other for the longest time.
Right.
And then the only way we're going to get around this is say, hey, we go further together. We share information. We lift each other up. We raise the bar. And over time, it changes. But I don't know if I have to say anything else because I don't want to dwell too much on that, but it's happening. You're seeing it happen.
And it is. That's what it is, right? We undercut each other on prices. Like, he's selling his hamburger for $15. I'm going to sell mine for $12.
Nobody was doing menu engineering. They're going, what do I need to charge to get people in the door? And, there's nothing left for me? How did that happen?
Right. And that's,
because of you.
The hindsight,
Yeah.
I wish I'd learned business first, right? Right. And to see this happening and people still not making the changes is shocking to me, right? Because, yes, to your point, never underestimate a small team of people and the changes they can make in the world.
You don't know what you
all
don't know.
changes come from a small place.
Yeah.
But the restaurant industry needs to come together. These changes need to be made. We're living in such an antiquated system. Like, the whole world has changed. Prices have gone up. People know their rights a little bit more. People are more educated thanks to internet, TikTok videos, whatever it is, right? Like, people understand their place in life a little bit more and are willing to speak up a little bit more. And if they're not, there's always somebody else with a camera that's willing to, willing to blast it.
Yeah, more and more difficult to be a sketchball today.
So
you can get discovered.
So then to stay stuck in that same rut of low wages, low prices, no benefits, we have to break that cycle.
Right.
And it's easier said than done, right? Because you can't just tell somebody to change. You have to show them how to change, right? You have to show them a model that works and go,
a picture.
This is what it looks like, and this is how you can get there. Now, are you going to be able to make those changes overnight?
Right.
No. But you have to take that step.
Yeah, and I love the example Rudy Mick gave me about a restaurant owner's job is to give their team the picture of perfection of what the job done right looks like. So they have an aiming point of what's achievable. But that needs to spill over into the bigger picture of what does your life look right when done right. And then you help them understand what the aiming point is for their life and what they can do. So the cycle ends. And the thing that I get really excited about is the restaurant industry. And I like to echo the mission statement as much as possible. That's why we have them, right? Visions and missions is to change the world by transforming the restaurant industry through these inspirational stories and empowerment. But what I love is that the restaurant industry literally has the power to change the world because we are the entry point for so many people, whether they're an immigrant or their first job as an adult. And if we raise the bar on expectations and set a high standard from the very beginning, it's only going to go up.
You change the world.
Yeah. And I think we need to understand the power we have. Second largest industry in the world behind healthcare. We have the power. Only if we communicate. Only if we lift each other up.
But we can't do this in isolation, right? Every restaurant can't fight for this alone. We need to actually come together and have these conversations. And that comes with transparency, right? Like, you have to be willing to talk about your failures, your successes. You have to be willing to talk about where you need help so we can help each other. But to try to like do all of this alone is impossible.
So what does it look like if we're listening to this, shaking our heads like, yeah, like me too. I want to contribute to the change that we're capable of making. Like, how do we do what you're doing? Paint that picture of what you're doing done right looks like.
So what we're focusing on right now is the education piece, right? And that's for restaurant owners and for employees. And it is about how to listen, most importantly, how to be honest and have these conversations. If you are still struggling as a small restaurant, you should be having these conversations with your employees so they understand your struggles, so they also can turn around and help you, because then they're more focused on, oh, maybe, labor costs have really gone up and maybe we should be more aware of how much time we're spending on this task. Do two of us really need to be here to do one person's job?
Yeah.
Because then that employee is not just walking away with more tips at the end of the day, but he has also helped you cut your labor.
Yeah.
Right? Hey, we're throwing away all of this food. Let's be more aware of food costs so that we can get the raise that we want. So he's not just spending it on food that we're flushing down the toilet.
Yeah.
There's such small steps you can take to make changes. Yes, maybe you can't afford to pay everybody $15 an hour right now, but start having those conversations. Where can we...
How can we do that?
Right. Like, okay, this is how much more money we need to make next month to be able to give two people this raise. So how do we get there?
I think an important thing too, and this is where it gets a little controversial, is like, what does it take to do that today? And the answer is going to come. There's one answer. It's, well, there's a bunch of things you can do. You can change. You can be more efficient with what you're already doing, but you can also ask for what you deserve to reverse engineer that number. You can start charging more. And I know that a lot of people go, well, then my customers won't come in, and like things are already getting to. I would argue that society is spending money on things that aren't as important.
So that is the biggest conversation right now, right? I mean, we're working with menu pricing that's 10 years behind. I mean, a lot of pricing should have gone up like just systematically over the years. And now we're trying to catch up and suddenly be like, oh, we need to raise prices by 18%. We need to raise prices by 20%. Now, of course, that's a shock to the community.
Right.
But there is...
Some people can't afford that. Yeah,
right.
But people who work in restaurants who are going to get paid more.
Right. But there is a way to do that, right? Now, if we came together, if, say, local restaurants came together and put it out, they educated their customers, put out an editorial and be like, hey, here's what's happened in the world the last couple of years. This is how much prices need to go up for us to sustain our restaurants. The reason you moved into this neighborhood was because there were a ton of restaurants here, right? So now sustain those restaurants. Otherwise, you're living in this neighborhood with no restaurants.
Right.
For us to raise the prices, we're going to break it down. Say, over the year, we're going to do slight increments and raise prices by 5% or 8% or whatever it is. And then be transparent. Like, this is the hamburger. The hamburger doesn't exist of just like the toppings that are inside it or the fillings. It is also utilities. It's also a paycheck. It's also benefits. It's also rent.
Yeah. And here's the thing for the consumer. And I don't know where you fall politically. I'm pretty middle of the road. I like to consider myself moderate. I see pros and cons to both sides. But I do like this idea that I rather have the choice to make a difference and do the right thing than being forced to do the right thing. And when people are forced to do something, they generally aren't as well receptive of it. And I think that we are in the ability. Here's the other thing. And if you lean left, this is I'm all for human rights and all that stuff. But I do think in terms of fiscal responsibility, we can choose to do things that will move much faster. And I think culture has the chance to has the ability for exponential change. Culture can change exponentially. And I think it's important for people to understand that if there's a choice, if there's a cultural shift, things can happen much faster. Whereas if the government uses systems and processes to force things to happen, there tends to be resistance. People don't like to be told what to do. But if you inspire people to do the right thing and you help them understand that when you do the right thing, holy shit, you feel great.
Right.
It's good for you. It's good for everybody. And we can choose to do the right thing, and that will happen much faster. And I just believe that.
It 100%, 100%. But that requires all of the players
Educating.
to be educated, right? And it is when you go into, well, I mean, probably not you, but when an average consumer goes into a restaurant, they just see the end product, right? They see the dish that was put in front of them. Why does this cost $20?
Because it's what you want and what you want.
But but they're not looking beyond that end product.
Right.
They're not looking at what it went into putting that product there, like the talent, the fact that chef also has bills to pay and he deserves a certain
quality of
life,
At the very
or
least, security.
Right. Or the maybe it is a college student that's trying to go to school and be in the position of this lawyer that's sitting at the table enjoying his meal, right? Like that person also deserves a quality of life. The landlord's needs also have to be met. The farmer deserves to get paid fairly for the food he is growing. He also has a family to support. I mean, there has to be a deeper understanding, and that doesn't just happen in isolation. That happens through communication.
So if we want to recreate what you've done here, is service something you're trying to scale? Are you building systems around what you're doing so other people can take the job done right look like from a service perspective and implement it in their community? Like, what's the future of this?
Yes. We want to involve as many people in the industry from all aspects of the industry, right? The industry doesn't just look like restaurants. There's so much more to hospitality. Have the conversations, bring up the biggest sticking points right now, like, raising prices, fair wages, healthcare, tipping or no tipping, whatever that, different can of worms. But I'm just saying.
Do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah,
do we not want to open that?
We're not going to go into that right now at all.
Well, I think you actually mentioned something on when I got the message, when you got the original message from you, was that you could speak to a smart approach to the minimum wage conversation. Is that
right? And I can talk to you about minimum wage.
You haven't talked about diversity either, which is I know something that is on your radar. So don't let me hold you back.
So I don't know. Okay, well, we're gonna jump all over the place.
Sorry,
right?
I'm doing that to you.
So we're gonna talk about.
Let's talk about the wages.
The wages, right? So wages should have gone up, right? Years ago. We're years behind in raising wages.
To the point where the government's forcing people to do it,
right?
Which just blows my mind.
Which is crazy,
right.
Because I get it. Yes, it has to happen. But to just say that, hey, raise your wages and not have an infrastructure in place to help you raise your wages, I think it's crazy. I think, local government needs to support small businesses. And how do you raise your wages? How do we subsidize something that you're doing? Is it a subsidy with your landlord that takes, gives you a little more money in your pocket so then you can raise wages? Is it Chicago, I think, put together a fund that the city is putting together to help subsidize small restaurant owners in helping them raise wages? So maybe,
You can't just drop a hammer and expect it to happen overnight.
Right.
Because change takes time.
There has to be support.
It has to ramp up.
There has to be support. And that support doesn't just come from the restaurant owners or restaurant workers or the consumer that's now going to pay 18% more for the burgers. It comes from legislative change, right? It comes from local government. Yeah. It comes from federal government, like put structures in place so people can afford to pay more. Give us a break somewhere. Rent can't keep going up. Utilities can't keep going up. Food prices can't keep going up. And then you tell us like, oh, also, I know you're still in debt from COVID, but pay people more.
Right. Oh, I don't know about you, but this month my SBA loan is due.
Right.
As of December.
Right.
I'm going to have a $500 a month bill on top of, that's just me, but I'm assuming restaurant owners are probably on that same page.
Of course. Yeah. And because they are still in debt from COVID, right? There was.
Yeah. We got some help, but
that's not enough help.
We got to pay back on that.
Right.
And I think this is the impending recession that everyone's talking about, is what happens when everybody has to pay back that loan.
So minimum wage, yes, absolutely needs to go up, but it doesn't happen by just telling people to do it. There has to be there has to be some structures in place for it, and has to be something you can ease into, not because you're also giving employees the wrong message, right? That you can march in and ask for $18 an hour now. Like, oh, I'm not going to work here if you won't give me $18 an hour.
Well, can I chime in there real
Yeah.
quick? Because I think something that's been coming up a lot within the communities I'm in and on the show is I think there's an approach to getting a raise. And Prakash Karam Chandani is somebody who's based in Ohio with Balanced Grill. And he's a perfect example, but it's this idea of building tangible framing of growth in your organization. So you come in at $15 an hour, you want $18 an hour? Okay. Here's what you do to do it. Like, here's how you get $18 an hour. Right. You go through this training with this curriculum that I've built so you can become qualified, and you have these new responsibilities and these new skills that will earn you $18 an hour. And guess what? You do that on your own time so that if you want to raise tomorrow, you get to work.
Right.
Start learning. Start training.
So that is what service does. We have a curriculum in place that employees need to go through.
Tangible framing for growth.
Right. So that when they leave our program, they are better situated to go get that job that will pay them $18 an hour.
Yeah.
Not just because I deserve it.
Right.
You know, I mean,
owners deserve.
You don't want to ask me what I think I deserve.
It's a two-way street. Right. They also deserve the person that's capable of demanding that.
But that goes back to our conversation about open books, about transparency, because when you look at a restaurant owner, you just think that they live this glamorous lifestyle, which is why so many people think it's easy to open a restaurant, right? Like, oh, I love going to restaurants. Me and my friends are going to open a restaurant someday. Like, what does that even mean? Like, please go home, stay in your lane.
If you like dinner parties, then stick to the dinner parties.
Right. You know, let me do what I'm good at. You do what you're good at. Like, you know, stay a lawyer. But education, right? Like, we deal with a very diverse population in the restaurant industry, mostly immigrants, a lot. I think the highest rate of employees is women, especially single mothers. People of color is the higher demographic within restaurant industries, again, because you don't need an education to go into this industry. You don't need particular skills. They're all skills that can be taught. So we take in people from everywhere, but then we're not professionalizing the industry. Then we're not giving them the tools to grow so that they can show up as managers at the Hiltons, Hyatts, whatever it is, right? They don't walk into the fine dining restaurants and see themselves mirrored in upper management. Right. And that's because they weren't given the professionalism. They weren't given the education.
I don't know a lot about this, but I do have I think a minimal understanding of the idea of the school system that exists today. It wasn't in, like, I think it started in like Oxford or something like that, England, the school system as we know it today.
Oh, okay.
But in America, it was industrialized. I don't know exactly when, but the school system, the system as we know it today, was designed to crank out employees. It was to put the burden on I think on the public system, like, the government, to educate people to crank out employees. They didn't want more owners. They wanted to be able to hire employees, right? I don't know where I was going with this train of thought. What were you talking about?
Diversity. Yeah, and a lack of education and professionalizing.
Okay, I think I'm coming full circle now. So I think that some of that responsibility almost has to go back on the owner again, where like if you open a business, if you're a business owner, you have a moral obligation to make people better people, whether that be how to do their job better or how to exist in this world,
right.
And I think a lot of that pressure was put on the school system, but the thing is they aren't trying to, I don't know. I feel like our ancestors kind of got it wrong a little bit, where it was just like, hey, we're just trying to crank out employees. We're just trying to be cogs in the wheel, but like humans aren't cogs in a wheel, Yeah,
and a lot of it does fall on restaurant owners, but as you know, restaurant owners,
not just restaurant owners, but like business owners,
right? But they don't always have the capability, right? They don't have the resources. They don't have the extra.
I think that's what it came down to, is they didn't want to put their resources into developing people.
And that's something that, you can't force people to think a certain way or feel a certain way. All you can do is lead by example, right? If we create a better industry, if we empower people from the ground up to ask for a better environment to work in, then maybe that shift starts happening with business owners, right? Because, oh, wait, why am I not getting any employees? Why are people not sticking around? Like that place down the street is always packed and their employees seem to stick around for years. What are they doing different? I think we need better role models that are more vocal.
You don't have to convince me of that.
Right? You know, and it is like, again, open conversation. And it's a lot of it falls on the public too, to fight for people's rights, right? If you go into a restaurant where you see the employees are being treated unfairly, do something about it.
Right.
Speak up.
I do want to make sure it's crystal clear that if we're listening to this right now and we want to, you've inspired us to speak up and to do something about it, and we're interested in adopting your model, service model, what's the next step? What's that look like? How do we take service into our city? Is that an option?
We're still babies in this, and we have a lot of learning and growing to do. We're on the path. We are about to open a service innovation kitchen where you can actually see how all of this works. We used Cafe Overlook, which is at the Franklin County Courthouse, as our pilot program on this workforce development piece to see how we can actually scale this. At Cafe Overlook, we have a case manager on site to help us work through any barriers that people might have to go back into the labor force, right? So whether it's housing needs, transportation, childcare, uniforms, healthcare, just basic mental health, or having a person to talk to. We take people through this curriculum of how to grow in this field. And then we connect them with other restaurants or hotels around town. And then we follow them through for another 6 months to make sure that they're living up to their end of the bargain, but also the restaurant owner is living up to their end of the bargain. With Service 2.0, the Service Innovation Kitchen, the space will be split into two halves. One half will be a workforce development program, but for existing service industry members. You've been a line cook for 5 years, you don't know how to move up that ladder. Come, go through the program with us, and we will give you the skills required to become a sous chef. You've been a bartender for 10 years, and you don't know what next. Come, go through the program, let's develop, and maybe you become a food and beverage manager. Maybe you want to become a sommelier, and we get you there. So it is about giving people a space to work and grow and teaching them the skills without them having to spend money on a school, right? So that will be one part of it. The other part of it is for restaurants that are ready to go with their concepts. We'll give them a space for about 3 months at a time where we can help them develop the final stages of their business. So we can teach them about food costs, labor costs, look at their menu, look at their concept, and point out the things that are not working, or what the pieces that they're still missing. So when they do go open the restaurant, not only are they going in with like a great plan, they're also going in with staff that they've worked with at the Service Innovation Kitchen, but then they also have clients that came into their restaurant for the last 3 months and are excited about them opening their own brick and mortar.
And I would encourage you and anybody listening to this to go beyond empowering them how to be a better employee, but how do you teach these people how to become owners?
Right.
And I would encourage anybody who's listening to this to listen to the episodes I did with Ray Villeman from the Tahoe Restaurant Group, who lets his employees buy equity in his business at like a point. Like you might not be able to buy the restaurant for $1 million, but you might be able to come up with $10,000 to buy a percentage. And then as you increase your cash flow, you can buy more equity in the business. And eventually that's the infinity game. How does this restaurant live beyond me? You know,
right.
Like how do we create that? Or maybe it's an ESOP, an employee stock ownership program. Maybe it's shared equity. Maybe there's a million different business models that we can create awareness about, so we can create an industry of owners, you know, like and spread out that wealth. That's what I see. That's the transformation I want to see in the industry.
Yeah, because everybody has a dream. Everyone walking into that restaurant for a job has a dream.
Right.
You know, they're looking at you, they're emulating you, they also might want a restaurant. And the onus is on us to get them there, right? Because what are you doing? I mean, yeah, you can cook a great meal and your restaurant might be a beautiful space, but what is the end product? Those are the employees, right? That's what changes the culture.
Yeah.
And it is on us
So
to
what's
do
the
that.
call to action? Like, what's the email that we go to?
So servicerelief.org, obviously go there, if you want to just take the simple route of just donating or volunteering, it starts there. But advocate for your restaurant workers. Go into restaurants, support them, try to understand fair food pricing, try to understand why benefits are important. And if you see that 3% charge at the bottom of your receipt for employee benefits, appreciate that. Tack on the 3%, but don't take away from their tips, because that's not like tip money that is going into their pockets. Simple things like, credit cards. Try to understand how credit cards work and how much those impact restaurants, because when you add a tip on a credit card, the restaurant owner is paying an income tax on that tip that you're adding on there. All of those things affect the profitability. There I go. See, I've got your disease.
Profitability. I got your
Thank
back,
you. Fight for ethical practices within restaurants and hotels or the places that you support. I mean, I know you want to, like I said earlier, move to neighborhoods that are thriving, right? You want a great nightlife. You want restaurants that are walkable. Well, they all need your support, and they need you to advocate for them, because we don't do this in isolation. If your local restaurant has raised its prices and you're confused as to why, ask for a manager, have the conversation, try to educate yourself. If you're a person that already understands and wants to help, talk to your friends that might not understand why this is necessary, or why prices have gone up, or why I should now tip 25% as opposed to 20%. Yeah. Start having those conversations.
We all have influence.
Right. And start talking to your local council people and see how you can help your local economy boom a little bit more. And this is for restaurant owners too. Like, we can't do this alone. Like, partner up with people in your neighborhood, other business owners in your neighborhood, and figure out a great way to vocalize that you are raising your prices. Yeah. Get involved in your local government. Go after the landlords that are suddenly raising prices, but you can't do that on your own. You need legislators to do that for you. So go have those conversations. Get involved in your local economy.
I love this, and it's making me, honestly, listening to you is making me think of the Restaurant Unstoppable core values, and I think a lot of the core values came out in today's conversation. So I selfishly want to go through the core values real quick, if you will entertain me. But it's we are students, we are educators, we are collaborators, we are communicators. We show up and we have fun. So it starts with you learning. You have to spill over and lift those around you as an educator. You can't do it alone. You have to collaborate with other people, and you have to communicate what's going on so other people can get the perspective, and communicate with an open mind. Understand that you don't have to communicate with the intent to listen and understand, not be heard. Right. We show up. That's half the battle, is just showing up, and then we have fun, because what's the point if we're not having a good time, right? So, and you were a shining example of the core values, and which is why I wanted to share them in this moment.
Thank you. I appreciate that. This has been amazing.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.